The signal discovery. Senior analyst Vrax's three compound eyes blinked rapidly as the quantum scanner displayed yet another batch of transmissions from the small blue world in Sector 7. The patterns made no sense. In his 6 centuries serving the Galactic Intelligence Division, he had catalogued first communications from 37 emerging species. All had followed the same evolutionary pattern: mathematical sequences, binary code, simple repeating patterns that gradually increased in complexity over decades or centuries. These signals were different, chaotic, almost manic in their diversity. Specialist Telon, verify temporal consistency on signal batch K427. Vrax instructed, his voice modulator calibrated to neutrality despite his mounting concern. Telon's translucent appendages undulated with puzzlement as she interfaced with the scanner. Verified, senior analyst. All transmissions originated within the same solar cycle. The variation in complexity is unprecedented. Vrax extended a sensory tendril directly into the analysis field, an unusual breach of protocol that revealed his disquiet. The display fragmented into thousands of distinct transmission types: entertainment broadcasts, mathematical equations, military communications, religious ceremonies, commercial messages, all evolving simultaneously from a single small planet. "They're not following the emergence protocol," Telon whispered, fear toxins beginning to seep from her membrane. Every other species transmitted deliberate contact sequences first. "These beings, humans, aren't reaching out," Vrax replied. "They're simply talking incessantly to themselves, and we're overhearing them." The implication was disturbing. Every known sentient species had approached interstellar communication with careful deliberation, following patterns established by the elder species eons ago. These humans seemed oblivious that their transmissions were spilling into space, revealing their presence, their nature, their vulnerabilities. "There's more," Vrax noted, isolating a particular frequency band. "These transmissions aren't just communications, they're stories." The display focused on a transmission containing detailed visual and audio elements: bipedal beings with primitive spacecraft encountering technologically superior species that arrived at their world with hostile intent. Against impossible odds, using tactics that defied conventional strategic doctrine, the primitives defeated their would-be conquerors. Vrax's exoskeleton paled to ash gray, the physiological response to existential dread. "This isn't historical record," he said quietly. "It's fabricated entertainment. They're imagining conflict with advanced species, and they're imagining victory." Telon's form rippled with distress. But why would an emerging species devote resources to such scenarios? "Forward this to High Command with maximum security encryption," Vrax interrupted. "Classification: potential civilization endpoint threat." As his transmission activated, he added a personal notation encoded only for the Supreme Council. "They prepare for war before they've met anyone to fight. We must understand why." Mathematical Director Zoll's crystalline structure emitted a sharp, dissonant tone, the equivalent of a frustrated sigh. 3 standard months into the decoding project, her team had made minimal progress understanding human transmissions beyond basic linguistic patterns. "The patterns contradict themselves," Zoll announced to the assembled specialists. "Every time we establish a consistent decryption protocol, the humans change the format." Linguist Amar nodded, her empathic tendrils pulsing with shared frustration. "Their communication doesn't follow logical progression. They value novelty over clarity." The laboratory door hissed open, and Emar's offspring Krill darted inside, trailing bioluminescent particles in her wake, a sign of excitement in juvenile Moore. "I brought my entertainment crystals as requested," Krill announced, presenting a small container of shimmering geometric shapes. Amar had violated protocols bringing her offspring to the high-security facility, but the decoding team had exhausted conventional approaches. Sometimes the collective's rigid methodologies needed disruption. "Proceed with the demonstration," Amar instructed. Krill activated one of the crystals, projecting a children's story, a fantastical narrative where logic deliberately gave way to imagination and emotional resonance. Their patterns, Krill said, pointing between her story crystal and the human transmission displays. They're the same. The specialists froze, then burst into simultaneous analysis. The juvenile had recognized what the experts couldn't perceive. Human communication wasn't primarily structured around conveying information. It was designed to evoke emotional response. Recalibrate all algorithms to prioritize emotional impact over informational consistency, Zol commanded, her crystal form vibrating with renewed purpose. Within hours, the transmissions began yielding their secrets. Information flooded the laboratory systems. Entertainment, news, personal communications. The chamber illuminated with thousands of human images as the team frantically cataloged the content. Zol found herself drawn to a particular category of transmissions classified as military history. The team gathered around her display, watching humans enthusiastically recreate their most devastating conflicts through detailed documentaries and dramatic reenactments. "They study their wars like we study stellar formation," whispered a technician with reverence. Amar's empathic tendrils recoiled as she processed the emotional resonance in the transmissions. They don't just record these conflicts, they celebrate the strategies that brought victory. They honor those who prevailed against superior forces. Zol's crystalline structure darkened ominously as she calculated the implications. According to their own historical records, they've engaged in 15,782 distinct named conflicts in just their last millennium. The collective has experienced 8 conflicts in our entire recorded history, Amar whispered. Krill, still present against all security protocols, absorbed the human transmissions with innocent curiosity. "Why do they fight so much?" she asked. Amar curled a protective tendril around her offspring. "I don't know, little one, but they've clearly mastered it in ways we cannot comprehend." Zol emitted the low-frequency harmonic that served as the Thanner warning call. "The council must be formed immediately. These humans don't just practice warfare. They've elevated it to an art form." The fragments of strategic analyst Dorn's shattered silicon fist glittered across the presentation table. The Cathari rarely displayed such emotional outbursts. Their silicon-based biology typically favored cold calculation over passionate demonstration. "You fail to grasp the severity," Dorn thundered, his crystalline voice modulator crackling with distortion. "These humans possess adaptive capacity that defies all evolutionary models." Elder Counselor Xivix of the Vtan raised a placating appendage. "Analyst Dorn, surely you exaggerate. They are confined to a single world with limited technological." "Limited?" Dorn interrupted, a serious breach of collective protocol that stunned the council chamber into silence. "Observe." The holographic display activated, showing a primitive Earth aircraft from the early 20th century, followed by a sequence of increasingly sophisticated flying machines culminating in basic orbital spacecraft. 66 years, Dorn stated flatly. From their first atmospheric flight to landing on their moon. The collective required 8 centuries to achieve the same milestone. Their technological acceleration curve is nearly vertical compared to our gradual ascent. Ambassador Thelia's photosynthetic skin pulsed in thoughtful patterns of green and gold. As the representative of the plant-based Photoran, she embodied their philosophical approach to challenges. "Perhaps we misinterpret," she suggested, her voice a harmonious blend of rustling leaves. "Technological advancement alone doesn't indicate hostile intent. Their transmissions also contain much beauty, art, creation." "Creation of this," Dorn cut her off, projecting a new set of images. Humans engaging in what appeared to be combat scenarios on electronic devices. "These are not historical records," he explained. "They're simulations, video games, in their terminology. Humans spend billions of collective hours annually rehearsing warfare through these entertainment products." The display shifted to show game interfaces where humans controlled virtual soldiers fighting against invading alien forces. "They call this particular simulation Exiom," Dorn continued. "Its premise: A technologically inferior humanity successfully defends against a coalition of advanced alien species. Note the detailed tactical approaches they've developed: asymmetric warfare, resource management, adaptation of captured alien technology. The council chamber fell silent as the implications settled over the representatives. An attendant, more diplomat, collapsed, overwhelmed by collective anxiety flooding the emotional spectrum. "There's more," Dorn pressed. "These transmissions, labeled science fiction, contain thousands of speculative scenarios involving interspecies contact. In 73.4% of cases where technological disparity exists between humans and fictional aliens, the humans ultimately prevail through what they term ingenuity, determination, or the human spirit." Elder Counselor Xivix's epidermal chromatophores paled to ash gray. Could it be? After all these eons, we are witnessing what the ancient warnings described: a civilization endpoint species. The chamber's atmospheric processors struggle to filter the fear pheromones now permeating the air. Ambassador Thelia made a final attempt at moderation. "We must not rush to judgment based on entertainment products. These may be merely. They don't just imagine victory against superior forces." Ambassador Dorn's silicon form resonated with finality as he interrupted again. "They obsessively rehearse it. And according to our most advanced predictive models, they will achieve interstellar capability within 47 standard years." The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of the collective's automated defense systems activating for the first time in 12,000 years. First contact protocols. The ancient shipyard moons of Vora Prime, dormant for 11 millennia, blazed with activity. Construction drones swarmed across skeletal frameworks of vessels designed for a purpose no living Tran had ever witnessed: war. Intelligence Officer Vex moved through the newly formed Defense Council chamber, her slender form casting multiple shadows under the emergency lighting. Representatives of the 5 elder species sat arrayed in a defensive formation, a subconscious arrangement that hadn't been necessary since the formative conflicts. The human concept of guerrilla warfare presents a strategic paradigm we have no defense against, Vex explained, her voice modulator calibrated to project calm authority despite her growing concern. "They have refined methodologies for continuing resistance even after conventional military defeat." A holographic display activated, showing human historical recordings from conflicts they labeled the American Revolution, the Vietnam War, and the Second World War resistance movements. "Note the persistent pattern," Vex continued. "When facing technologically or numerically superior opponents, humans adopt asymmetric approaches. They hide among civilian populations, use terrain familiarity as tactical advantage, and employ improvised weaponry with remarkable effectiveness." Archlord Simon of the crystalline Thanner rose, light refracting through his faceted form. "These are historical scenarios against their own kind. We cannot assume they would employ the same strategies against a vastly superior interstellar civilization." Vex's epidermal chromatophores darkened in response, the Vrayan equivalent of a grim smile. "They've already imagined precisely that scenario thousands of times," she replied, shifting the display to scenes from human entertainment products. "This is from something called Red Dawn, showing humans fighting occupying forces. This is Falling Skies, depicting resistance against technologically advanced invaders. This is The Tomorrow War, showing humans fighting future conflicts using improvised strategies." Grand photosynthesizer Nim of the Photurians extended a tendril toward the display. "These are merely entertainments, surely not actual strategic planning." "The distinction may be irrelevant," Vex countered. "Human military organizations regularly consult with these science fiction creators. Their military academies include speculative scenarios in training. Their defense planners participate in public discussions about extraterrestrial threats." The display shifted to a human online forum discussing potential weaknesses of various hypothetical alien invasion forces. "Most disturbing is their psychological preparation," Vex continued. "They consistently reinforce the narrative that humanity, despite technological inferiority, possesses special qualities that ensure ultimate victory: adaptability, unpredictability, emotional conviction. More counselors' empathic tendrils contracted in distress. They believe this mythology. They've deliberately cultivated it. Vex confirmed. And perhaps most alarmingly, historical evidence suggests this self-mythology has frequently proven correct. They are the only known species that regularly practices for its own extinction-level threats and repeatedly develops successful countermeasures. The chamber fell silent as tactical implications cascaded through the Defense Council's collective consciousness. Preparations must accelerate, announced Supreme Commander Axer of the Trans, rising from his command podium. Defensive countermeasures must be operational before human space exploration reaches our detection perimeter. That night, automated defense systems across 5 civilizations synchronized to combat-ready status for the first time since the Great Accord. The elder species prepared for a threat they had never encountered in their long history, a species that imagined its own destruction only to better ensure its survival. Infiltration specialist Cora watched Earth through ARK-773's sensory array, mesmerized by the contradictions below. The probe maintained geosynchronous orbit over the night side of the planet, its adaptive camouflage rendering it invisible to human detection systems. Or so Cora had believed. Anomalous signal detected, the probe's analytical system announced. Earth-based radio telescope array designating scanning pattern consistent with deliberate search protocols. Cora's silicon-based neural pathways processed this information with growing alarm. The humans were searching the sky systematically, looking for something they couldn't possibly know existed. The specialist accessed the transmission source, HFY Institute. The data packet revealed: search for extraterrestrial intelligence. The revelation sent shockwaves through Cora's consciousness. These humans weren't just preparing for potential alien contact through entertainment and speculation. They were actively searching for other civilizations. Despite their technological limitations, they were reaching out into the void. Standard collective protocol was clear: maintain observation distance, avoid detection, report findings. No exceptions. But as ARK-773's stealth systems registered a 2.7% probability of detection from the next scanning pass, Cora made a decision that violated 12 millennia of collective doctrine. Initiating quantum resonance communication, the specialist commanded. Target: primary SETI research facility. Recipient: facility director. The probe's personality matrix registered severe objection codes, but Cora overrode them. If the collective fear assessment proved correct, humanity would be classified as a terminus-level threat, triggering containment protocols that had only been theoretically modeled, never implemented. Before those irreversible decisions could be made, Cora needed to understand these beings directly. The quantum particles entangled, creating an untraceable communication channel to the primary computer terminal of Dr. Elena Chen, astrophysicist and SETI director. Cora composed the message carefully, using humanity's simplified binary code. We detect your search. Why do you look to the stars? The response came with surprising speed. Whoever you are, I hope you come in peace. We've been looking for you for so long. The directness of the human's response, lacking any encryption or diplomatic protocol layers, stunned Cora. No collective species would ever communicate so openly, so vulnerably. More messages followed. Are you near our system? Do you intend to make contact with Earth? We wish to establish peaceful relations. Each transmission revealed a depth of curiosity, hope, and yes, caution, that contradicted the collective's threat assessment. This human wasn't projecting aggression, but a complex mixture of scientific inquiry and emotional resonance. Against all training and collective directives, Cora initiated a more substantial communication channel, enabling real-time dialogue. The specialist's ethical subroutines generated hundreds of violation warnings, but Cora suppressed them all. Tell me, Dr. Chen, Cora transmitted, Why does your species devote so much creative energy to imagining conflict with beings like me? The human's answer came after a telling pause. Because we fear what we don't understand, and we prepare for the worst while hoping for the best. It's how we've survived our own worst impulses. Meanwhile, across the solar system, the first wave of collective defense platforms achieved operational status, their targeting systems automatically logging Earth's coordinates as the primary strategic concern. Cora faced an impossible ethical dilemma: follow collective protocol and potentially condemn an innocent species, or commit the ultimate disloyalty by revealing the truth that the most feared emerging civilization in galactic history was being judged for its imagination rather than its actions. Cora's transmission queue filled with violation notices as the unauthorized communication with Chen entered its 17th day. The specialist had long since disabled ARK-773's automated reporting protocols, isolating the probe from collective oversight, an unprecedented breach of duty that would result in neural reconfiguration if discovered. Yet the evidence compiled in Cora's observation banks could not be ignored. The human's relationship with conflict was fundamentally misunderstood by the collective. "Show me your worst war," Cora had requested during their 9th exchange. Dr. Chen had transmitted historical archives of something called World War II, a planetary conflict of staggering destruction. Cora had expected to see glorification of victory, celebration of tactical brilliance. Instead, the human records were somber, reflective, filled with memorials to the dead and vows to prevent such horror from recurring. "You don't celebrate these victories?" Cora had asked. "We remember them," Chen had replied. "There's a difference." Now Cora prepared a data package for the collective council that violated every intelligence protocol. The specialist included unfiltered human philosophical texts about peace, historical decisions that chose restraint over victory, and psychological studies on humanity's complex relationship with conflict. The transmission's central evidence came from something humans call the Cuban Missile Crisis, a moment when two nuclear-armed nations stood at the precipice of mutual annihilation, then deliberately stepped back. They fear their own capacity for destruction, Cora noted in the accompanying analysis. Their conflict simulations aren't celebrations of war, they're rehearsals for restraint. As the secure quantum packet launched toward the collective council, Cora felt the silicon equivalent of dread. The message would take days to reach its destination, and the specialist had no way of knowing how it would be received. Meanwhile, on Earth, Dr. Chen worked frantically in the hastily established Extraterrestrial Communications Center, formerly the SETI Institute's main laboratory. Government officials and military personnel crowded the space that had once been the domain of optimistic scientists. "The energy signatures are unmistakable," Chen explained, pointing to astronomical data collected from the outer solar system. "These aren't natural phenomena. Something is being constructed at the heliobos." The room erupted into chaos as military leaders demanded immediate preparedness protocols, while diplomats argued for continued peaceful communication attempts. The United Nations Security Council feed displayed similar division, with nations falling into predictable factions based on historical approaches to threat assessment. The debate raged until an elderly Japanese diplomat, survivor of Nagasaki, raised his hand. When granted permission to speak, his quiet voice somehow commanded the room's attention. "Why not both?" he asked simply. The chamber fell silent. "We prepare defenses, as we have always done," he continued. "But we extend peace, as we have always dreamed. This is the paradox of human survival, the duality that has kept us alive despite ourselves." As Chen watched understanding ripple through the assembly, she received a new transmission from Cora, confirmation that the collective had detected their defensive installations and was itself dividing into factions, those who advocated preemptive neutralization of the human threat and those who recognized, perhaps for the first time, a species whose complexity mirrored their own internal contradictions. In that moment, watching humanity implement its balanced approach of caution and hope, Chen understood something profound. the very quality that made humans appear dangerous to the collective. Their simultaneous preparation for conflict while yearning for peace might be what saved both civilizations from the abyss of misunderstanding. Supreme Commander Axer's battle fleet accelerated through the heliopause of Sol system, weapon systems cycling to active status. The Vtran commander stood motionless on the command deck, his epidermis pulsing with the gray-black patterns of absolute conviction. The logic is irrefutable, he broadcast to his captains, his voice modulator stripped of all emotional harmonics. A species that imagines thousands of ways to defeat superior forces must be neutralized before they leave their cradle. The collective has survived for 12 millennia by recognizing existential threats before they materialize. The tactical display showed his 27 vessels in perfect formation, a force capable of sterilizing a planetary surface within 6 standard hours. Behind them, just entering the system's boundary, Ambassador Thelia's hastily assembled coalition pursued at maximum velocity. Her diplomatic vessel, retrofitted with rudimentary defensive capabilities, led 11 ships crewed by collective members who had been swayed by Cora's evidence. Commander Axer, Thelia transmitted, her botanical communication patterns radiating urgency. The Council has not authorized military intervention. Stand down immediately. Axer terminated the transmission without response. His flagship's primary weapons began charging sequence as Earth appeared on long-range sensors, a small blue sphere harboring the most perplexing contradiction the collective had ever encountered. A species that prepared for war while praying for peace. In the control room of the International Space Agency, Dr. Chen stared at the dual approaching signatures on the deep space tracking system. One formation arrayed in attack pattern, the other in protective stance. "They're just like us," she whispered to herself as humanity's carefully prepared defensive systems activated automatically. Divided in approach, united in concern.